Welcome to the Business Talk, a global podcast series that highlights distinguished faculty members and their impactful scholarly contributions. I'm Deepak, your host from India. We are honored to welcome Dr. Brandon Szerwo and Dr. Amy Sheneman as our distinguished guests on Business Talk today. Before we begin, let me introduce the guests joining us for today's episode. Dr. Brandon Szerwo is an assistant professor of accounting and law at the University of Buffalo School of Management and a certified public accountant whose teaching and research focus on financial reporting and audit quality. He earned his BA, MS, and PhD from the Foster School of Business at the University of Washington. Our second guest for today's episode is Dr. Amy Sheneman, an assistant professor of accounting at the Ohio State University's Fisher College of Business, whose teaching and research focus on auditing and financial accounting. She holds a PhD and an MS from Indiana University, an additional MS from Grand Valley State University, and a BA from Deep York University. Today, Professors Brendan and Amy joins us to discuss their research, Does Gender Composition of Audit Teams Matter? An examination of audit quality and audit cost. Let's not keep you waiting. Please join me in welcoming Professor Brendan and Professor Amy to the podcast. Professors, we deeply appreciate your gracious acceptance of our invitation. It is an honor and privilege to host you today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Professors, to start, what initially motivated you to investigate whether the gender composition of audit teams affect audit quality and audit fees, given prior mixed evidence on individual audit partner gender?
Sure. I'll go ahead and start with that. For me, it started off with sort of a broad general interest in human capital and auditing. Auditors, meaning the actual audit employees, are the most important parts of the audit process, right? They're so important to audit production. So for example, managers and above need to be CPAs because of how important auditor judgment is to reaching audit conclusions. Yet for the longest time, we didn't have a lot of visibility into the audit workforce just because it was not visible to researchers and others outside of the audit firms. And we saw this crack a little bit in 2017 in the United States with the introduction of Form AP, which gave us some insights on the actual audit partners that were signing the audit opinion. So we got to see a little bit, but the vast majority of the audit team that performs the audit was still invisible to researchers and others outside the audit firms. Now, there were two important sort of developments that changed this. And the first is professional networking sites where people started posting their work histories and things like that. So you could say, hey, I worked at, firm X, Y, and Z in 2006 or whatever it happened to be. And the second big innovation was our ability to collect this data from the internet and put together databases. So all of a sudden we had this ability to actually measure the audit workforce. So that was kind of a fun innovation here, and it allowed us to do a lot of new research. So as to why look at gender, to me, it was a couple different things. The first of which was looking at these firm audit quality reports and seeing gender discrepancies across ranks within the firms and kind of wondering why that is. So, for example, if you look at people in the early ranks, early career individuals, we almost see gender parity across many different firms. But as you move up in ranks to partners, gender disparity is largely gone, and it's dominated by men. So it's kind of under that sort of piqued my interest. And then drawing on my own personal background as an auditor in the past, I remember working with a lot of fantastic women auditors. They were very competent, very skilled, and so being sort of curious, well, how come you see this great auditors, but they're leaving the field, and what are sort of the implications there? So it was kind of those two things. And then kind of a third part here is then I started researching a little bit into gender differences that have been found in management literature and psychology literature. And there's some interesting findings on differences in how men and women tend to think or act or behave relative to one another. So I thought there maybe could be something here interesting to find. And that's sort of what started the project.
Yeah, Dr. Amy?
Yeah, so I was really interested in it Primarily from my own background. I mean, I worked at a CPA firm and I saw a lot of female senior managers leave, sometimes at the manager level, sometimes at the senior manager level. And it always bothered me. I mean, it's like, I'm here. Where's everybody going? And so it was really, I was just curious about how this would manifest itself into an on average result across audit firms, because I was only seeing one audit firm that I was at personally. And so that was really why I got interested in the project.
Professor Brandon, the study finds that offices with more female auditors deliver higher audit quality and charge lower audit fees. How do you interpret this combination of higher quality yet lower cost in practice?
Yeah, so at the most basic level, I interpret this as a huge win for clients when they have audit teams that are have more women on them, right? So I mean, who doesn't want better quality at a lower price from their service provider, right? So again, I think it's just a huge a huge win, excuse me, for these clients. So research across many different fields finds differences in how men and women tend to act and behave and process information and respond to ethical dilemmas and more. So these differences are not necessarily innate, but they are persistent, meaning they persist within a society over time and across individuals on average. This doesn't mean everybody necessarily acts the same, but we do see some on average differences. The finding of higher audit quality and lower audit fees suggests that teams with more women are more efficient audit teams. It suggests they're more diligent in performing their audit work. So this combination of higher quality and lower fees is a pretty powerful finding, I think.
Professor Amy, you show that the association with better audit outcomes is stronger at the staff level, particularly among audit seniors. What is it about the senior role that makes their gender composition so influential for audit quality and efficiency?
That's a really good question. Looking at it from the firm side, audit seniors play a crucial role on audit teams. Typically, these individuals have been at the firm for 1 to 2 years prior to promotion, and the responsibilities of audit seniors are much more extensive than audit staff, for example. So an audit senior will not only be a team supervisor and a project manager, but they'll also be responsible for completing work papers. Typically, the areas of the audit that they are most responsible for are the more complex areas. And that will vary across clients depending upon the industry the client is in or the risk profile that the firm has. So for instance, perhaps on one client, the audit senior might be involved in revenue recognition or goodwill or fair value estimates of securities that are not actively traded. So essentially, overall, audit seniors have increased responsibility for audit quality as well as audit completion.
Professor, the paper relies on office level gender composition as a proxy for engagement team composition. How confident are you in this proxy? And what are its main limitations when we think about real world staffing of audit teams?
Yeah, this is a good question as well. So in an ideal world, where we have no constraints related to money, time, or access to data, I think Brandon and I, as well as Josh, would have loved to have seen individual auditors on the engagements themselves. Unfortunately, we don't live in such a world, and audit firms do not provide such data. We did several robustness tests in the paper to test our proxy of engagement team composition. And while we do acknowledge that the measure is noisy, we are comfortable that that office level gender composition approximates engagement team composition, particularly because staffing occurs at the local office level. Now, if I think about that relative to real world staffing of audit teams, there are limitations to increasing the composition of women. For example, audit firms are limited to hiring individuals that apply for their positions, which suggests there might be some self-selection into certain offices or even certain audit firms. That being said, as Brandon mentioned earlier, we do see that there's a near 50-50 split between men and women at the audit staff level as they initially come into the audit firm. However, that gender split as they go up in rank, particularly at the audit partner level, is about 80-20, where men represent 80% of partners on average and women represent approximately 20%. These numbers are staggering. They also lead me to believe that audit firms potentially need to be more purposeful in who they're developing, who they're promoting, and who they're trying to retain within the firm. Our results related to supportive environments also speak to this. Audit firms should probably think more about how the environments that they're creating could really help female auditors feel supported, and then ultimately where those female auditors could be more effective.
Professor Brandon, you document that a one standard deviation increase in female staff is linked to a meaningful drop in misstatement rates and reduction in audit fees. How large are these effects in economic terms, and how should firms interpret their magnitude?
Yeah, thank you. So in the paper, right, we document that a one standard deviation increase in female staff is associated with an 8.9% decrease in the rate of misstatement. So, for example, right, we got on average 47.1% of staff are female or women. If you have excuse me. So with that one standard increase, you're seeing a 9% reduction in the misstatement rate. So for example, right, if you have, let's say, a 15-person audit team, which is a good sized team, but not huge. If you have one more of those audit seniors is a woman, or excuse me, is a woman, you're seeing a reduction in the misstatement rate of about 9%. And I think that's pretty big for just, again, one person change on a 15-person audit team. At the same time, if we take a look at average audit fees, which are about $1.44 million per year, that represents a decrease in audit fees of about $29,000. Now, I would say that's not a huge decrease in audit fees, but again, you're getting the lower audit fees and the higher audit quality at the same time, which is a great combination of results, again, for clients.
Professor Emily, the results are more pronounced in communities and offices that appear more supportive of women, such as high social capital areas or offices with stronger female partner representation. What does this tell us about the importance of organizational culture in unlocking the benefits of diverse audit teams?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we do find in the paper that the relation between female staff and audit quality is more pronounced in certain environments where there's what we call greater support for female auditors. Now, management research has shown that organizational culture plays a key role in productivity and employee effectiveness. And I think our results are pretty consistent with culture being important to productivity. And as I talked about before, audit firms need to be intentional about the culture that they're creating to help support their employees. And as we see in offices with greater female partner representation, female audit staff are much more effective at influencing audit quality. And our results related to social capital suggest that the community plays an important role in really unlocking that potential for female auditors to be effective. Now, I do think there's an opportunity for future research here. While we have documented a relation between gender composition and audit quality, we don't necessarily know the mechanisms or the drivers that are really creating that relationship. And I think future studies could really help us understand support systems that provide increase that relationship, or even societal norms where we can maximize productivity within the workforce.
Professor, you find that in offices with low female partner representation, the positive association between female staff and audit quality largely disappears. What does this imply about promotion pipelines and leadership roles for women in audit firms?
Yeah, this was very interesting to me. This result essentially suggests that female staff are less able to affect audit quality when offices have fewer female partners. So if I put myself in the leadership position of an audit firm, this suggests that the promotion of women through that talent pipeline is critical to maximizing the positive influence that my audit female staff can have on audit outcomes. Research shows that when you properly support employees, you achieve better outcomes. So I think retention is a real key here for the audit firms. In addition, we know that promotions are really a signal to staff. So if you're a female staff and you're not seeing female senior managers get promoted to partner, it sends a negative signal to those staff, which may be why audit firms are having trouble really trying to make progress in terms of increasing the number of female audit partners.
Professor Brandon, interestingly, your evidence suggests that adding more women to audit teams improves outcomes in a way that is distinct from general gender diversity. How should firms think about gender composition versus diversity when designing and managing audit teams?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a subtle point to the paper. And so thank you for asking that. So at the base level, diversity is a separate construct from gender composition. So when we think about diversity, right, diversity is about increasing the collection of knowledge and skills present within a team, such that there is more knowledge and more skills on teams to draw from when there is a more diverse team. This should ultimately increase team performance, um, which a lot of research does find that benefit, which is interesting in itself. However, the research also shows there are some drawbacks to diverse teams, and it can actually harm performance in certain ways as well by eliciting biases and introducing conflict. So, kind of as an example here, diversity is, at least gender diversity, is maximized in the context when team is equally composed of men and women. So if you're talking a 10-person audit team, diversity is maximized when you have 5 men and 5 women. But what we're finding is the strongest effects when we're past that, when the team might have 6 women or 7 women on a 7-person team, right? So we're kind of past, we're actually at a point with decreasing diversity at that point, but we instead are increasing gender differences, specifically stronger traits that might come from women. So again, diversity is that separate construct there. So our study finds best audit quality and lowest fees when teams have a majority of staff that are women. So importantly, in these teams, gender diversity is actually lower. And so again, this is more about the collection of differences in women relative to men and things like behaviors and traits. So our study really kind of points to this importance of gender differences and not necessarily gender diversity. So, as kind of an analogy, think of it like a toolbox. Diversity is going to give you more tools to work with, right? More skills, more behaviors that hopefully would improve team performance. But by studying gender differences, our investigation is more about like which tools are the best for this particular job. So men and women have persistent, on average, differences in how they act and behave, respond to ethical dilemmas, and more. So to continue the analogy, it is like men and women are choosing different tools. So it's not necessarily about the collection of tools, but which ones are being chosen. And so our research is saying that the collection of tools that women tend to use more so than men are linked or related to better audit quality and lower audit fees. So it's not necessarily about having more tools, but understanding rather which tools seem to be the best in this particular context of auditing. And so the findings about the importance of supportive environments get at this even further. These environments, right, kind of allow women to more effectively use, getting the tools that they tend to prefer, using that analogy again. So it's a different construct, gender diversity versus gender differences, and our study really kind of focuses on those gender differences.
Professors, from a policy and practice standpoint, what are the key implications of your findings for audit firm hiring, retention, and staffing strategies, especially as firms seek both high-quality audits and cost efficiency?
Yeah, I'll start with this one if you don't mind, Brandon. So
Sure.
research, as we know, shows that when you properly support employees, those firms can achieve better outcomes. So I think main questions that I would ask if I was leading an audit firm is, why are we losing so many female auditors through the pipeline? We're clearly hiring them at the same rate that we're hiring men, but there's something that's happening within that pipeline where we're not able to retain them and keep them. So what makes employees stay at a firm? What makes them want to leave an audit firm? I really think that this is an area where qualitative research, where they can rely on surveys or even interviews of actual auditors, it could really be useful in helping to improve our understanding of why auditors, female auditors in particular, seem to exit the audit firms. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Brandon.
Yeah, just similar thoughts on. I think the firms need to figure out ways to support women better and to identify what these traits are that happen to make these audits uh, higher quality and more efficient. And I think there needs to be additional research there.
Professors, I would like to conclude this episode with one last question. Looking ahead, what open questions or future research directions do you see stemming from the study? For example, around causal mechanism, other aspects of team composition, or long-term career outcomes for auditors in different gender environments?
Yeah, and I think the main thing is that causality that you asked that question on that Amy mentioned a bit earlier. I think that's the key here, right? Is we have an association study. We can find that teams with more women tend to outperform teams with more women in the audit context. But we can't identify exactly what differences drive the results. It's different in behaviors, it's differences in actions, it's differences in judgment. We can't answer that question at this point. And getting insights there would be extremely helpful to improving overall audit quality, right? So if we can identify the actions or traits that are leading to improvements in audit quality and efficiency, those traits and actions or differences or whatever they happen to be could be emphasized or coached in all auditors, right? So men and women. These traits and actions are not necessarily unique to women, right? Rather, they're just more prominent in women. So if research can identify, again, these traits and behaviors and actions, then audit quality and efficiency could be universally improved. The same would go for sort of any team performing any task and sort of identifying the true drivers of what is driving audit quality or team quality and efficiency.
Yeah, I agree with Brandon. I think really getting at the cause for the relationship that we're documenting is really important. I think there are a ton of unanswered questions in this area in terms of the drivers of the relation, the mechanisms. I think long-term career outcomes as well for auditors are very interesting from a gender perspective. We know that women are leaving. Well, what are they going and doing? Are they becoming CFOs? Are they becoming controllers? Are they choosing to opt out of the workforce? A lot of those questions we have some research on, but I think there's a lot more to learn.
Thank you, Professors Brandon and Amy, for joining us and sharing these insightful perspectives with our listeners today. We have really enjoyed this conversation. We hope our audience found it thought-provoking as we did. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Josh sends his thanks as well for the opportunity.
Thank you.